Okay, everyone. Pretty poor stuff yesterday, wasn't it? A 3-0 defeat for Celtic at Ibrox. Not many of us probably saw that coming. Certainly not Stevie. Hopefully he's never that optimistic before a game again, Asim. In fact, he's banished from the channel for the foreseeable future for his optimism. Yeah, weird one, wasn't it? Just horrendously bad.
I don't think he was the only one that was optimistic. I think that was the kind of general consensus, and I think that's why it becomes all the more pretty frustrating because I think we all went into it pretty confident, and I've seen a lot of chat about people saying they don't feel comfortable feeling that confident. There was some crazy predictions doing going doing the rounds, and I never thought it was going to. I didn't for 1 minute think it was going to be comfortable or easy, but I didn't think it would go the other way. Where it would be it would be such a doing. It's weird because I went into it fairly relaxed. Obviously, we know the situation in the league. We're in a comfortable position in it, and as comfortable a lead as I can remember in a long time going into it. And I don't know if that impacted just everything, the whole kind of mood, because it seemed like that seeped into what was a pretty shambolic performance, if we're being totally honest. And obviously, we'll kind of touch on all that, but it's as poor a performance as I can remember at Ibrox. And there's been we've had a couple of these kind of defeats at Ibrox over the last few years. Where Ange had the kind of dead rubber game at the end of that season. Rodgers has had a defeat before there as well, but I would say that's up there in terms of performance. Has just been absolutely nothing. There was nothing to get excited about at all.
It reminded me a hell of a lot of that Ange game that you touched on, the game that was a dead rubber, and we lost that 3-0, and we were awful that day as well. Like, we were totally horrendous that day. And I guess the excuse the players had that day was that it was a dead rubber. The league had been won the week previous, whereas obviously the league is still alive at this stage of the season. So there's really no excuse in a derby game for a performance like that. Yeah, I mean, I think you're right. It was a weird build-up to the game, I felt. Like, I don't know if it's just a combination of different being so far ahead and still like this whole weird kind of atmosphere with no away fans. I think I've always said it takes something away from the build-up to the game, even when you're watching it in telly. But I felt so relaxed in the build-up to it. And I genuinely wonder if the players, that was part of their issue, was they were just too relaxed for the game, a bit
You look at the
complacent.
kind of games we've had against them in the last couple of years, 2 3 years. Every game has had so much riding on it because the title race has been close. You look at all four league games last season, right up until the split. There was something really massive riding on it. You've had cup finals, cup semis. This one just felt totally different in the build up. Where people are calling it a dead rubber. Obviously the massive gap in the league. So yeah, 100% it took the edge off it. I had all my kind of family around, brothers, cousins, dad. We were all watching it together, and all of us kind of felt that relaxed way at the start of the game. So 100% felt weird, but for me, that's no excuse because, as you said, the Ange one, yeah, the league was won, and I remember there was quite a fallout even after that. In terms of people were not happy even after that one because just how bad we were. And likewise today, 14 points clear or not, for me, that level of performance. And again, I can handle, and we can all handle maybe a slack performance like the cup final, we weren't at our best, or, games where we're just not at our best, players are having an off day. What really disappointed me today, and I'm sure you and many others are probably the same, it just felt like there was a lack of hunger, like we just didn't compete, other than the first couple of minutes. At no point, maybe a couple of minutes after the second half as well, but it just felt like they were first to absolutely everything, and that's hard to take because we knew what they were going to do, we knew how they were going to perform. Why we didn't have an answer to that, that's what really frustrates me. Why the hunger and desire didn't seem to be there. Why we didn't change things a bit sooner. And the fact that now that's 2 games in a row that we've been quite off it against them. Obviously, the cup final we ended up winning, and it was a fairly even game. But you can't call today that. Today was as one sided as some of our hammerings over them.
No, I thought it was a considerably worse performance at Ibrox than it was in the cup final. I
Yeah,
don't think we were great in the cup final, but like we had moments in that game, and as you say, probably had as many moments, if not more, than them in the cup final. Today there was just nothing. that's the thing I'm kind of struggling with. It was like every single part of the performance was awful. And that's not you kind of overplaying thing. There's always a tendency in these videos after games to,
Mm-hmm.
maybe not necessarily in this channel, maybe in kind of other places, maybe down south with teams down there, to, over dramatise everything and every player was awful and all of this. But genuinely, you would look at virtually every player, maybe apart from Cameron Carter-Vickers for me,
Yep.
who had really bad games, like 2 out of 10 games, and you look at all the different things you look for in a derby or any performance from Celtic, and the quality of our passing was just ridiculously bad. Like it was almost funny if you weren't
Yeah.
so invested in it. It got to the stage. There was a stage in the first half where like Real Hati just kept
Well,
giving the ball away. It was
and
mad.
he can be guilty of that at the best of times, but the how frequently he was doing it was
Yeah,
alarming. But then it's not even him; it's the fact that it was guys who are usually the guys who take the most care of the ball. Callum McGregor, Alistair
Kuhn.
Johnston, Kuhn. Like it was so bad, and you're just watching it thinking, nah, this can't carry on. We're
Yeah,
surely going to at some point get better, and it just didn't seem to happen at all. And it was just surreal watching us play
it
that poorly.
was.
And the thing is, well, I seen they were talking during the game. Neil McCann said that maybe the players look spooked, but Chris Sutton kind of played that down, and I kind of agree because we played in far more intimidating Ibrox atmospheres. We played in games that have got a lot more riding on it. There was no need for our players to feel spooked. If anything, it was the opposite. They were just too casual, and
Yeah,
that was almost the fear that yeah they bought into the whole yeah we're miles ahead. They can't even beat us when we're off form. We'll just turn up and not have to absolutely win the battle first. It was almost a case of just yeah eventually our football will do the talking, but you can't do that, and that's the thing. These derby games, as much as there's a big gap between the two teams, and we've dominated Scottish football. Derby games in general, like we've spoke about, other than the few that we've pummeled them at Parkhead, they've been tight games. So it's always kind of small margins. You cannot just turn up to these games and just play casually and expect to still win it. So that was the alarming thing for me. And the level of passing, you're right, only CCV for me gets pass marks today. If you've got 10 players that are below,
but
below
yeah.
average, then you're gonna see what we did.
But none of them were even, the other ones were even close to being pass marks. Like it wasn't as if they were like 4 or 5s out of 10. Like I would say, like you would go through the entire team and they were like 2 out of 10. Maybe some of them would be 1 out of 10. The point on being spooked, I kind of agree with you. I think from the start of the game, I didn't actually think we were spooked, and the irony was we actually made a decent start to the game, and we had that corner, and Rangers were the ones that looked really nervy, and I was watching the game licking my lips, going like
If we
you could
score, it's going
already,
to be
yeah,
carnage. Yeah,
genuinely, you could already kind of tell there was a real nervousness. I can't remember exactly what it was, but I think there was like a misplaced pass. Was it Czerny? It was in the second minute he misplaced a pass, maybe even the first minute, and there was like real groans. And already I was like, oh my god, like they're already kind of a wee bit unhappy after a minute. Like, and we made that fast start. And I think Kyogo has a great chance, but he just kind of can't sort his feet out. There's then there's then a moment that I think is the first bad moment in the game. It's 4 minutes in, and Callum McGregor gets caught in the ball by Diamandi. And as I say, we'd actually made an all right start at that stage. We're kind of moving the ball about, and I don't know what McGregor's doing. He just thinks he has so much time, and for a guy who's played in this fixture so much, it's kind of inexcusable. Like I don't know what he's doing. He waits and waits. Diamandi nicks it off him, and then from that point, I actually do think we got spooked by the atmosphere later on in the game. I think as it went, I can't think of what other reason you would give for players doing uncharacteristic things like passing the ball out of the park like Liam Scales did several times. Kasper Schmeichel did it in the second half. Remember that one where he just passed the ball out of the park for no reason? So I don't think Celtic started the game spooked. I think, and I'm not putting it all in that McGregor moment. I'm not saying that if McGregor had been better there, would have gone and won the game or anything like that. Clearly, players are going to have bad days anyway, if you know what I mean.
yeah.
But I
I
do
think you're right
think
in
that was a
I think you're right
factor.
in the point that moments change games, and you're
Yeah,
right.
yeah,
I think at the start of the game, your first 5 minutes, we're on the front foot. You've got a corner. You can hear the groans in the crowd. If we score at that point, it's completely different. And then what happens is when we start making a couple of mistakes, it gets their crowd going, gives them a bit of encouragement. Then they get that kind of early goal, and you're right, the whole kind of atmosphere changes. We've been down at Ibrox before though, and recovered quite quickly. You know, that's the alarming thing. You're waiting for that moment for a Callum McGregor or someone just to take control again of the game, and it just got worse and worse. The passing got worse. And yeah, look, credit to Rangers in the sense that I thought they did like I didn't think they were great in the cup final that everyone was talking about, but I thought they were pretty good today. But my God, did we help them? You know, we made them look good as well at points because we were constantly giving the ball to them, constantly allowing their crowd to get more involved. And then you're just waiting for something, a spark, and I think you're waiting for maybe changes. And again, you know, nobody escapes criticism in terms of even the manager because you're maybe hoping that he can change something and see, you know, like he's usually good at that. But I just even at half time, I was surprised the same team came out. And other than maybe a wee 5 minutes again at the start of that half, it looked like they were the team that were going to score.
Yeah, because it was a bit of an improvement early on in the second half, but very quickly turned the other way again. And I think that one of the commentators, I think it was Neil McCann, made the point, even though we were looking better, Rangers still looked the more likely team to
Yeah,
score that second goal. And it wasn't a huge surprise when that went in. See, even if away from the bad passing, the point I was going to make a while ago, bad passing, like that can kind of happen because you can just get days, I guess, and we've seen them in the past when, for whatever reason, things are off. But like other parts of the game were off as well. Like we were pulling out of tackles, which I just didn't get. Nicholas Kuhn was pulling out of tackles. Real Hati just losing tackles and losing 50-50s and all of that stuff. But then also we were that bad with the ball, but also when we didn't have the ball, how open were we? Like, see the amount of times that in the first half where they just had a big switch over to the other side and like we looked all over the place. There was a moment when they were attacking, I think it was Paulo Bernardo was in the left back position. I don't know where Greg Taylor was, and it was like 2v2 in the middle, and I'm like, it was just like, it was inexplicably bad to the extent that you're looking for external factors for that. And sorry, someone driving very loud outside. I know, like the manager mentioned, like Arnie Engels had been unwell before the game. You're almost questioning your head, like, is there some sort of
it's a
bug
bug.
going
Yeah,
through the team or something? Because it was like it almost it wasn't them today. It's just
we
bizarre.
were saying have they been out for New Year's or something? Have they been on the drink? Because
Yeah,
it was almost you couldn't explain how bad it was. There was a point I think Hadji made a pass from his own half or kind of just inside his half, and it took out three or four of our players, and they were on the attack, and that happens so often where it just looked like one pass and they were in. We were so exposed. It was almost Dortmund-esque, obviously not to that extent, but it just looked like we had no protection for the back line at all. And you're right about see this. I mentioned it earlier, and you kind of reiterated it there. Like, see off days where you're just not on it, you know, and the passing's off, or you know, the final ball, whatever it may be. Again, you can almost accept that. I think why everyone's really disappointed tonight, and there's been a bit of a fallout. Some of it maybe over the top, as is always the case after a defeat. You know, I think our fan base are just so not used to losing any games that when it does happen, it's sometimes one extreme or the other. But I think where even I'm kind of like really disappointed today, and almost yes, in the grand scheme of it, it's not a huge deal because of the gap in the league. But I want to know, like, why was there not that same level of effort and hunger, and like you say, pulling out of tackles, and because it's a derby game, that's not on. You know, you cannot go into these games and just kind of half-hearted, just go into tackles and not going for the battle. So that part really is something that I'm struggling with, and being like, well, we knew what we're up against. What's the explanation for just not being at it?
maybe the players thought they could get away with that.
Yeah.
Maybe they looked at the league table. Maybe they look at the fact that we've beaten Rangers virtually every time we've played them over the past couple of
And is
seasons.
that human nature? Is that something that across the
Yeah,
board in football can happen when you're that dominant?
yeah.
And as much as the team talk would have been absolutely not to do that, but it's seeped in, and I think we spoke off air just talking about how there's a lot of chat about a wake up call, and look, it could well be. We just need to make sure though, because if we look at patterns, obviously the cup final should have been a wake up call, and that we got away with one there because it wasn't a great performance. And then if they've then done that today to us, you're wondering, okay, have they now found a few answers as to how to combat us? What's our response? And that's where, as long as we learn from it, yeah, this game can be forgotten about come May. If we're picking up the trophies, and we'll forget about it, but it shouldn't become a pattern now where they feel they've got the better of us again. I know end of the day, it's their first win in God knows how long, right? And Rodgers has earned a bit of a slack, to be cut a bit of slack. Look at his record. But as long as it just doesn't become a pattern, because I remember when was it, the COVID season? No, the year before that, we won the cup final, the Fraser Forster Cup final, despite not playing well. But they followed that up with a win at Parkhead, which was their first win in quite a while, I think, against us. And while we went on to win the league, again, I know the next season was the COVID season, but then they basically done us in all the games. So we just have to make sure that this isn't a pattern that's emerging. That they now feel like they've kind of got our number in terms of how to combat us. And I hope that's what the takeaway will be from the manager and players. That that's not on.
Yeah, it's not on. Not acceptable. I just wonder if the players did turn up and generally thought that they would turn up and beat Rangers. And I think Brendan Rodgers kind of touched on that after the game. He said potentially they're looking at the points gap and thinking they don't necessarily need to bring that same intensity. But I think it's just such a reminder that in any game really, but in these derby games, you have to be at it, because they are especially away from home, when you're in that atmosphere with no fans and they get their backs up, and we just really struggled all day. But hopefully it is a wake-up call for the team. And I agree, listen, we can come on to the big picture stuff at the end, but big picture is that, like, we're fine. There's no reason to panic here. We're clearly still huge favourites for the league. I think everyone still thinks we're going to win the league. I think every Rangers fan still thinks we're going to win the league. Although there's maybe some of them, Asim, have you been scouring? Have you found any of them with their wee things going, if they drop points against St Mirren,
Nico Raskin's now the best midfielder in Scotland. A few I've seen a few things that today's the start of a few careers for these Rangers players. They've arrived, all that kind of chat, and it's the same cycle, isn't it? Look, we just have to take care of our own business. The away form's a bit of a concern for me. It's 4 games now where we've only scored 1 goal. Dundee United, we drew a blank. Today we drew a blank. Dinamo Zagreb, and then Aberdeen was the one we scored, but again didn't create a lot. So I think January's came at a good time, because I think some of these players maybe need that kind of competition, a wake up call. There's a few positions where we spoke about it. Our players haven't been firing, whether that's up front, or we all said we need a wide player anyway. Someone just to keep everyone on their toes. So I think the windows came at a good time. And you know what? The fact that, I think you said this earlier, and I seen one of your tweets, there's no January break, which is good, because the last thing you want is to stay over this for a few weeks. We've got games coming thick and fast, and the fixtures have fell well for us. We've got 2 home games coming up. Good opportunity to just kind of try and put this one behind us and get the points racked up again.
Yeah, it's a really big point. I'm so glad there's not a winter break this year, because imagine you were going into this 2-3 weeks having to think about that. We play St Mirren on Sunday afternoon. Like, there's no time between the fixtures, and this game can be forgotten about relatively quickly, I think, if we get a reaction and go on a win and run and just really... I think knowing what Rangers are like, there's drop points in the post. Like, I'm not particularly worried about the gap getting smaller or anything. It just felt very much like that was a kind of game to be taken on its own, and obviously it didn't go well for us. Just want to touch on a few players, because obviously people are talking about various players and definitive statements, etc., and we can maybe have that discussion. I mean, Real Hati's a big one, who was clearly just absolutely awful in that first half, and it's not I don't think it was a huge surprise to people either, because he can have games like that. It's just got to the point with Hati where you have these 2 extremes, and he's either best player on the pitch, outstanding, we're not going to be able to keep this guy, he's going to be leaving, record transfer, etc., or he is totally hopeless, hurting the team, man down, the opposition's best player. And genuinely, those are the 2 extremes, and you don't ever get anything in the middle. And he was just... terrible in that first half.
And
And the game generally.
is the concern becoming that it's the latter that's becoming
More often, yeah.
more often, and
Yeah.
especially in derby games, and we need more of the Leipzig Rio Tati, which it's we had the Aberdeen Cup semi and then the Leipzig, and that was the kind of peak that he's had this season. And then
Yeah.
since then it's been hit and miss, and I think maybe he's been kind of ever present as well. Through a lot of the rotation, he's played a lot of minutes, so I think maybe the next couple of games a good time to kind of bring him out the team, and freshen that up, because he was bad today. He was bad, and the thing is, you don't want. Yeah, you know what fan base football fans are like in general. It is very extreme as well. And as soon as you look online or whatever, everyone's fully going against him if he has a bad game, or the opposite when he's on it. But I think I think he needs to come out the firing line, because today was really, really poor. And I think that midfield in general, none of them played well. But he set the tone with a lot. Well, you could argue Callum McGregor, who I rarely criticise, but he was really bad as well today.
Yeah.
And it's not like him, because usually these are the games where you can rely on him to try and take the game by the scruff of the neck. But I think it'd be difficult to try and single out players today, because it was so collective. Alistair Johnston and Nicholas Kuhn, two of our best players this season, awful.
Yeah.
I would say Dyson Maeda didn't have a good game either, but he wasn't giving the ball away as much. Greg Taylor, I'm trying to go through. There was nobody other than CCV. There was no one. Scales, who again, he's came on to a game this season, and improved from last season, I think, especially on the ball. Went back to kind of the reservations we all had about Liam Scales last season. So it was just
I
one
mean,
of
his
those
head
days.
went, didn't
Yeah,
it? Like, very clearly in that atmosphere. To be fair, players weren't moving for him either.
yeah,
So I mean, like,
yeah,
and Rangers were clearly just leaving him on the ball. Just quickly on Hatate, for me, like, I mean, I've kind of stood up for him a lot. I think for me, the game at Ibrox was just a kind of bit of a final straw for me, and I just watch him, and I just kind of wonder if that same hunger is there that was
yeah,
at the start of his time at the club, and I just feel maybe it's reached the kind of the end point for Hatate at Celtic. I'm not saying sell him as of this minute, sell him in January, but I think at the end of the season, he's probably one I would look to move on and refresh that position. I just don't. I think for a while I've been feeling that we're just waiting on Hatate, maybe getting past some of the
yeah,
injury troubles he had last season, and then getting a run in the team and consistency. I now have huge doubts if that's ever going to happen. I think this is kind of real Hatate now for
yep,
Celtic. I could be reading into things too much, but I just get the impression he maybe thinks he should have moved on by now and gone to a better league, and maybe feels he's outgrown Scottish football. The irony is that he
he's
hasn't,
not.
because
He's not.
he's not a Matt O'Reilly. Like, Matt O'Reilly had clearly reached that point where he was going to move, and Jota as well.
Yep.
He's not reached that point. I just don't think he's going to get to that point. So you're clearly not going to get the fee that we all hoped. I thought at one point Hatate would be a record sale for us, 25 million. I think if you got something like, and people might laugh here, I think if you get something like 10, 12 million, which might be pushing it, I know, but he's still a talent, and people can look at his Leipzig performance. But I think I'd look to move him on in the summer and just get someone new and hungry in that position.
It'll be what, three and a half seasons by then. I
Yeah,
think
it's a long
that's a
time.
fair, it's a fair shift he's put in. I think you're right. There's been chat nearly every summer, isn't there, since that
Yeah.
second season, or that he's almost kind of been looking for moves, and Matt O'Reilly had his breakthrough season last year, and we were all hoping maybe that would be the kind of season that Rio could have, and it's just been, he's far too inconsistent.
Yeah.
A couple of good Champions League performances may raise that kind of profile and price again. But you're right, you have to kind of constantly change the team, freshen it up, get players in that are hungry at the start of their career, like the way Bernardo and Engels now, they're kind of going to be the heartbeat of our midfield going forward. And then yeah, you'd probably look to move Rio out in summer and get someone else in. And I think most fans are probably kind of in agreement with that. He's not had the season that we kind of all hoped. And I think if you the figures you mentioned, I think we'll do well to get that kind of sum.
Yeah, quite possibly.
Yeah.
Yeah. I thought Luke McCowan was good when he came on. He would be in my team going forward for a wee period. I think I want to see more from him. I think the time is right. just one final moan I want to do, Asim. It's wound me up for months, but the two forwards, Kyogo and Ida, their inability to hold the ball in and link the play is really frustrating me, and they were both at it again today. Ida had one late on in the game where the ball came in and he tried to
By the
flick it
Black
and the
Hugh.
ball just went through for the goalkeeper. And Kyogo had one in the first half where again the ball comes in and like he tried to flick it off to the side and it was just nowhere near a Celtic player, and it's really frustrating me, and I think it's been a bit of an issue in recent months that these guys, they need to tighten up their build up play. They need to
Yeah.
hold on to it. They need to find a teammate. It's really winding me up that.
That and you look at their back line today and goalkeeper, right? So it's a makeshift back line. They've got Proper, who I don't rate. You've got Sterling playing at centre back. And then you've got the goalkeeper, Liam Kelly. Their right backs, not their usual right back either. So how we didn't put them under more pressure today. We made it so easy for them. Teams like St Mirren and Motherwell have showed how to cause them trouble. Now, I get that we've got our own way of playing, but this is where I feel like the manager let himself down a wee bit today as well. Or just in general, the whole manager, staff, players, collectively, right, Celtic, because we gave them the easiest game they could have had. I don't know, like if you've seen the XG, I think it was something like I don't know 0.7 or something. It was ridiculously low. Even just if you watch the game back, we absolutely created nothing. That's not acceptable to go there and have that little chances and to give what was a makeshift centre back pairing, the easiest game they'll have all season. We've got to adapt in game. We've got to see what's not working and change it. And you're right. I thought Ida maybe could have came on sooner, but then even when he did come on, I don't think he did anything to show that that could have worked differently. So just frustrating. But another moan, which I want to say is just the coins being thrown again. We spoke about
Yeah, I was going
this.
to bring that up. Yeah.
It's how many times now? I think I don't know if it was on this channel as well, but it's been spoke about all week that we really feared, and this was on the back of us saying like if we go ahead or if we win, this is when they're winning, and we still can't guarantee the safety of our players and staff. And apparently, there's another incident in the dugout where Rogers as well. So it begs the question that they're wanting fans. Well, the plan was to get fans back at Celtic Park for the next game, but the difference is we can guarantee the safety of their fans, their staff, their players. It's been proven time and time again that anytime we go to Ibrox, fans or no fans, they can't behave themselves. So I hope there's something really looked into that.
Yeah, definitely an issue. Celtic say that Police Scotland are investigating two separate incidents. Obviously, there was the Engels one late on in the game. Brendan Rodgers said to be a target as well. Brendan Rodgers says that Engels could have suffered a serious eye injury if the coin thrown by a Rangers fan had caught him an inch lower. So you're dealing with really, really dangerous stuff here. But yeah, that's that commented on. Yeah, having done all this, Asim, and maybe people have found this a little bit cathartic. I did say to you before we came on, and maybe this hasn't come across in the video, everyone, but I don't feel particularly like angry. I didn't feel particularly angry during the game. I still feel fine about where this Celtic team is going. I don't think we need to overreact here. I've seen people, like, I saw someone saying, "Oh, Callum McGregor hides every time a big game comes around" and stuff like that. It's like, what have you been watching for the last 10 years? And people saying, we've wasted money on Trusty because he's sitting on the bench. Trusty, I think, should have played, but Trusty was unwell. That's why he missed Tannadice. And I think most of us would have had Liam Scales in the team, given that he'd played the last last 3 games, and got 3 clean sheets. So I think it was a tough day, really bad performance, but generally the team just need to use that as a wake-up call. That's the thing people keep saying, but for all of the kind of frustration in this video, I think we're the same amount of points we were ahead of them prior to Tannadice. So, and most people would probably have taken that at this stage. So the big picture is we're fine in the league and we just now need to go and get back at it. And the team reacted so well after Dortmund, didn't they? So hopefully they can do the same.
Yeah, it's tough on days like this, and you'll probably have been on the socials as well, and sometimes it's probably best avoided. But I kind of sometimes put out my comments just almost as my kind of coping as well, just putting my bit in it. But you do see some extremes, and that's, like you said, people just going for players so heavy and just forgetting all the the good things as well. Everyone's entitled to an off day, but by the same token, I'm not one of those guys who, oh, everything's rosy, it's all good, because I do think you have to analyze games, and you have to look at patterns, and not just be like totally ignorant to the fact that, look, that was an unacceptable level of performance. So I think both are acceptable ways to react, like balance, but also look at the bigger picture. Look at the fact that, I mentioned that back in Martin O'Neill's time, I know completely different circumstances, two different teams, a very good Rangers side back then, but the year that his first season we won the treble, we lost the second fixture at Ibrox 5-1. Nobody really remembers it. At the end of the season, this will be forgotten. But provided we learn the lessons from it, and the kind of performance isn't replicated again, we've got a good, barometer of where the team's at, because it's not a case of just beating St Mirren's and beating these teams. We've got a huge game against Young Boys and Aston Villa, so you still got big games coming up, where it's not a case of, oh, we'll beat the Ross Counties and we'll beat the kind of cannon fodder SPFL teams, and then we'll feel good about ourselves again. No, because like we've been saying all season, the measure of this current Celtic side isn't just domestic dominance anymore. We've got higher targets, so I'm glad about that. This team has still got a good chance to kind of prove themselves again against Young Boys and then against Aston Villa, to show that this was just a blip, or a really poor day at the office. So plenty still to be encouraged about, and I'm just glad that there's games around the corner. Like, we've got two home games coming up. This time next week, the gap could be higher again. I don't really care if it isn't, as long as it's no lower than 11. Like you said, I'm confident with how the league's going to go. I just hope that, like you say, the players will really be hurting today, and make sure that kind of performance isn't something we see again.
Great stuff. Thank you very much for joining me. They're not
No
always
worries.
easy, these videos, but appreciate you sticking in. And yeah, we'll move on, everyone. I'm sure you'll let us know what you made of the game, and I'll tackle them in our next video. As I say, we're very close to our next match anyway, so we can hopefully move on from this pretty quickly. Thanks everyone for watching. I'll chat to you soon.